my special guest today became an orphan at a young age, and through life experience from poverty to wealth, he has learned to turn his mistakes into a greater purpose for his life. He is on a mission to help others learn to stand up and speak up in their lives. He's also been a TEDx speaker and so many amazing things. Please welcome my new friend, Oleg Lougheed, to the show. Lougheed, I did it anyway. You see what happens? I talked myself out of it.
Life gives us moments when we have the opportunity to make a choice. And what we choose has the potential to change our lives forever. Join us now for another inspired episode of The Breakthrough. And now, please welcome the creator and host of the show, Jessica Dugas.
That's one of the things that I was actually just going to say never, because it happens. And you know, it's just the thing that I think we acknowledge as part of this life is that we're not perfect.
If there's nothing else I've learned through this show, it has been that I can have a plan and I know, and then it goes the complete opposite direction.
Yeah.
That's just how it works.
And I think that's what this life is learning how to deal with the imperfections of everyday life. Yeah. And we never know what's going to happen. We never know how it's going to happen to us. And even this whole concept of having a plan, right? You and I, prior to this, we rehearsed it, we wrote it down, but then when it came to action, it came out something completely different. So it's just interesting to know and understand, and also just relate back to the time that we're experiencing now. And that is, for those that are listening, we are in very early stages of this coronavirus outbreak, and just understanding that that's something that we don't have control over. Mm. We don't know how it's going to spread. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know the impact that it's going to have beyond the impact that it already has.
Right.
But
right.
At the end of the day, I think the only thing that we can do is choose how we react to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I could have totally Jessica 10 years ago would have stopped the recording and been like, no, that is unacceptable. We are doing that again. But I'm just rolling with it. And I think that's part of, like, I know we were talking about this before the show. It's been part of our journeys to sort of embrace that imperfection and just go with it. So I'd love to start off the show on a little bit of a lighter note and share with us something that is bringing you joy in your life right now.
I think what's bringing me joy in my life right now is having the time to connect with many different people and hear their stories, hear their experiences, and be able to create a safe space where we can acknowledge each other as human beings and understand the different journeys that we're going through and the circumstances that we are faced with. And prior to this, I guess you could say, pandemic actually happening, what I realized was happening to me was I was always running out of time. I was always running out of time to connect with people. So I would write down my list of things to do, connect with X number of people on this platform, or respond to all of these messages or connections or whatever it may be. Well, now is the perfect time to do it. Because, I mean, for those that are listening might be able to relate. If you had a 9-to-5 job and now you no longer have it, now you have all the time in the world to connect.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that I've learned as far as how anything happens or how anything has happened in my life, it's been through connection. It's been through connection with other people. But the connection with other people, I don't think can fully happen before you connect with yourself. And so understanding who you are and what you've been through and how you are choosing to look at any of those circumstances and challenges and identify possibilities and opportunities, that's what allowed me to get into this space. Right. And connect with people and have these conversations about real life topics that are happening now and other ways that we can add value to it. So if I could sum it all up, it's really just my joy of connecting with other people and knowing that at the end of the day, majority of us are facing similar things, different events, same themes.
Right. I think that's something that my husband and I have talked about quite often lately, is that at the end of the day, we may be struggling with certain things, but we're not alone in this. There are other people going through it as well. And I think, to add to what you were talking about, so many people have spent years saying, I wish I had more time for myself. I wish I had more time for my family. And now it's kind of thrown into your lap, and a lot of people don't know what to do with it. There's a little bit of a struggle to be like, okay, well, I have this time, but now I'm kind of filling up that time with a little bit of panic because we don't know what's going on. And so I think it's definitely a time of change and challenge and transition for a lot of people. And we still have this beautiful ability here to connect with each other. It just might look different than what we've always envisioned it to look like, right?
Yeah, and I think the other point that you bring up that's also important to note is this concept of visualization, right? Telling yourself, I wish I had more of this. I wish I had more time. I wish I had more resources, more freedom, whatever the word may be. Well, if there's one thing that I've learned throughout my life is that it's one thing to wish, but when the reality actually happens, they don't oftentimes align. So in this case, if the wish was, I wish I had more time, well, you didn't know that coronavirus was going to bring you more time. You didn't know what that thing was going to be, right? That's going to bring you that element. And so now that's I think the first step in recognizing this as a possibility rather than an adversity that's going to define you for who you are, is look at it from the perspective, well, you've wished upon this. You wanted more time. You wanted more time with your family, with your loved ones, with whoever or whatever you wanted to do. Well, here it is. You can't control what brought you to it, but what are you going to do with it now?
Right.
And so I think part of that journey boils down to becoming very conscious and aware of what do you need that for? You wish you had more time to do what? And how much of that time is enough to satisfy that need? Is it 24 hours? Is it 48 hours? Do you want to do that for the rest of your life? And if so, well, you're going to have to figure out some of the other parts.
Right.
The income, the basic needs.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how manifestation happens.
We're learning real quick, I think.
But this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting time the last little while dealing with all of this, and it'll be interesting to see by the time this episode comes out where we're at in the world, and we can kind of I'm grateful for these moments of, you know, having these conversations in this time and recording that, and then later on being able to look back and go, okay, what were we feeling then, and what have we learned, and where are we actually ahead? Are we where we want to be? And if we're not, what changes do we need to make to get there?
Yeah, what can we do differently? And I think that's the question that I always try and ask myself is, what can I do differently with the circumstances that are currently at stake? And that's it. Part of that journey, what I've learned is it really starts with embracing yourself as an individual who, like we said, is operating in an imperfect world, right? And that is, I don't know what I don't know at any given time. And so just learning to love myself with all of that, it's an everyday challenge. Whenever I make a mistake, the question of, damn, I can't believe I did that, or you're an effed up human being for doing that, but rather, it's okay. What'd you learn from it? What are the lessons? What are the takeaways? And so I think very quickly what I've learned after interviewing so many people is that having heard their stories and understanding that we're very quick to judge others. When we make mistakes, we're so quick to judge others, but in reality, if we were to just take a step back and say, hey, I just did this last week, or I just did this yesterday, same exact thing. So why am I here judging this individual? Rather, what questions can I ask, or what space can I create, or I can just better understand, why did you make that choice? And what did you learn from it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different lessons that I just know is going to come from current circumstances. And it'll just be, it's not to say that we won't have our challenging moments. Even those of us who have done a lot of inner work and a lot of working on ourselves and improving ourselves to be able to better cope with times like this, I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's still a lot more to learn, and we're going to see a lot of that later on. I know that a lot of our listeners maybe aren't familiar with you, and we were introduced by a mutual friend, and then I went on because, like I do, when somebody gives me a name, I'm like Google, and I find all the things. So I went and listened to your TED Talk, and I was immediately intrigued by your story. Will you give everybody just a little bit of an idea of your background and where you come from?
Mm-hmm. In a nutshell, my story and the way that I'd like to tell it is in 3 phases, and that is the ages of when I was 9, 12, and 24.
Mm.
And when we talk about the adversity and the different challenges that we face within our lives, that has been my life. The organization that I actually started when I was 24 years old called Overcoming Odds. And the reason why is because I've believed and continue to believe that that's what my life has been, is a series of odds and obstacles that I had to work through and overcome, but yet I was always able to do so.
Mm.
Now, the shape and the form has always varied, or the way that I got through the thing, but the belief that I instilled within myself that I can do it has always remained the same. So the story and this journey begins in a relatively small town in Russia called Chubarkul, where I was born to a mother and a sister who was 18 and still is 18 years older than I was. There's still some mixed stories behind who my birth father was or what had happened to me, but the story there is he was not there during the time of my birth. And so from a very young age, I had faced a lot of traumatic circumstances and very difficult circumstances where I had to figure out moments, what my family was going to look like, where am I going to get food today, what am I going to sleep, who are the people that are going to help me get through the circumstances that I was in. But even though there were times where I used to look at it and kind of blame myself or had a negative approach to a lot of those things, I really began to look at it from a different view within the past 6 to 7 to 8 years. And that is help myself understand that those are the moments that define me.
Mm.
Those are the moments that define my thinking. And those are the moments that help me understand that I'm not defined by that past. The circumstances I was born into do not have to be my present, and they don't have to be my future.
Mm.
And I can make a choice, a conscious choice within that, in choosing the life that I want to live.
Yeah.
So the very first stage of it all was 9. And that is when I actually chose to give up my parents' rights as a 9-year-old kid, due to everything that I had faced prior to that. And that is all those moments where I didn't have enough food. I was constantly in these situations where my mom was being abused. She was drinking a lot at the time.
Mm-hmm.
She was an alcoholic. And so I didn't really have a place of stability when it came to my family. And so that's where I decided to take a different path and create a different trajectory in my life and actually give up their rights. I went into an orphanage, ended up living there for 3 years, from 9 to 12. Had experienced probably everything that you can imagine an orphanage offers. But ultimately, once again, that place served as a place of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because there was a program that was put together where a lot of the orphans who were part of that were able to travel to the United States and perform in front of some of the local families
Mm-hmm.
who were looking to adopt kids from Russia. And that's what put me in front of what are now my parents.
Mm.
And so when I was 12, I was finally adopted by them, came into Ann Arbor, Michigan, spoke very little words of English, probably knew enough, not enough to carry a conversation, but enough to maybe start a conversation.
Right.
And that doesn't serve you well moving
It's
forward.
not a two-way street at that point.
Exactly. I say hi and then you say something else
Right.
and I can't respond, and boom, that's it. So it was a challenge.
Mm.
It was a challenge. There were many challenges that I had to work through in not only learning the language and understanding how to create these friendships how to create a bond with my family, how to move forward with my life. Because here's the thing, when you are forced with learning all of these new elements, it's not like your life stops.
Right.
It's not like your life says, hey, it's okay for you to take however long you need to learn this language. It's, you're going to have to learn this language. You're going to have to make friends. You're going to have to create that family relationship. You're going to have to perform well at school. Oh, and then you're going to have to start thinking about college. And then you're going to have to start thinking about life beyond that.
Yeah.
All at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the biggest thing that sometimes we miss as far as kids that get adopted or people that come here from other countries. The number of challenges they face all at one time.
Mm.
It's not just a one thing. It's everything that you have to manage. So you got to keep the ball rolling in all those areas.
Right.
But I was fortunate. I was fortunate enough to have a group of parents that believed in me. In the background, you see the picture here. This is a picture of my adopted mom and I at the orphanage prior to me being adopted. And if there's anything that I could say about them, it is that they believed in me, they've supported me, and they told me that I can do it. They've inspired me that I can do it, and they still do. So whenever the adversity comes and I pick up the phone, I always know that they're there. They're always on the other line. And I'm extremely grateful for them because they taught me so much about life, and yet they gave me a space and an opportunity to explore life on my own terms. Make my own mistakes, fall down 9 times, but get up the 10th one and keep going through it, and always being there and saying, hey, just keep going. My father says half the battle in life is just showing up.
Yeah.
Half the battle is literally showing up, and then participate. Take whatever the lessons life has to give you and go forward with it. And so through those years of understanding not only their mindset, but the person that I was becoming through my experiences, that's what led me to create this space at 24, where I wanted to create a platform for other people to understand that no matter how severe the adversity may be in your life, that you can do it. You truly can overcome whatever the obstacle is. The result, I don't think it's possible to fully envision, almost like word for word, because whatever that you envision as far as a solution, there's always going to be a variation of it in the reality form. But the fact that you can see it and you can do it, that's what helps you get over that hump. And that's what helped me. When I looked at my life, when I look at all the challenges that I faced and that I continue to face, I just continue to tell myself that I can do it. That never say you can't do something in life.
Right.
There's everything, you can figure out anything as long as you set your mind to it. And it's one of those things where I think it's difficult to understand unless you make it a practice. And that's one thing that I've learned recently, is that there's no such thing as common sense. Because whatever's common to me may be foreign to you.
Yeah.
And same is true as vice versa. So the way that you perceive your world is completely different than the way that I perceive my world. So everything that I share, those are the things that only work for me. They may not work for you. But what's important is to try.
That's a really interesting concept with the common sense. I don't think a lot of people think that. I think we see we maybe make a comment about somebody doing something which in our mind is absolutely ridiculous, and we couldn't see why they are doing that, and we go, I wish that person would just have some common sense. Well, now I'm just going to switch that, and I'm going to say, I wish they had some of my common sense, which might not be theirs. It might not be theirs and how they were taught. But it's really interesting to look at it that way. And I also love what you're talking about your dad teaching you as well, about half the battle being to show up, because I think that's such a huge part of being successful in your life, because a lot of people don't show up. And one of the things that I love to ask my guests on this show is that there's a lot of people who have been through adversity, like we talk about often on this show, of people hitting complete rock bottom and being knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. What is the difference between you and someone who gets knocked down and doesn't get back up?
you just keep going.
Mm.
It's as simple as that. Just keep going. Trust me, I face adversity like that every day. When you step into a field and your whole playing field becomes unknown, you have no other option but to keep going. So I'll pick up the phone, and anyone that truly knows me, they'll be able to relate to it. I'll pick up the phone and I call one of my friends and I say, hey, this is what's happening, but I know that I'm going to get through it.
Mm.
And one of my friends, she says this to me every single time. She says that the biggest difference between someone who created something and someone who didn't is they just kept going.
Mm.
They just kept pushing. They kept finding the way. Here's the thing when it comes to showing up. There's no criteria, okay? I don't have to be in a business suit right now in order for you to acknowledge the fact that I'm showing up in this conversation. Showing up literally means you coming in as whoever you are with whatever you know. Mm-hmm. There's no criteria. There's no agenda. You just show up and you play the game. You dance with life in whichever way that it wants you to dance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that we sometimes forget, is that the showing up part happens in so many different forms. Sending the message, talking to a person on the phone. It doesn't have to be that ultimate stage. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it this way, for those that are in the field of public speaking, and I'm going to try not to jump from one topic to another as much.
That's okay. We do that here.
this is a perfect story that I can think of as far as the showing up part, is that oftentimes when I have a conversation with people who are trying to go into the field of public speaking, they will only tell me this, or they oftentimes tell me this, that, oh, I don't have to pay attention to my inner voice. I don't have to pay attention to how I'm externalizing things in personal conversations, mm-hmm. in friend-to-friend interactions. Here's the thing. Those interactions actually become the interactions that you have on stage.
Right.
And so everything is a journey. Every time you speak is an opportunity for you to look at how you speak, what you're saying, and how does it resonate with you? Mm. How is it impacting you? Because if you think about it, everything is a stage. Everything is a stage. This is a stage. Phone conversation is a stage. When you go out on the street and you walk your dog and you meet people on the street, that's a stage. Mm. Stages vary. And I think sometimes we forget, and we essentially make ourselves believe that the only stage that I should be more conscious of is the one where there's actually a stage and I'm in front of people.
Right. It's like looking at everything as an opportunity as well to hone your craft, to practice, to just have that. I mean, just to have another experience. I think we prioritize things in our mind sometimes, yeah, to where it's like, okay, we see this as important maybe because it's a bigger name, or because it's in a more well-known location, or because there's more people attending, and we categorize it higher. So then I feel like maybe we don't show up as much as the opportunity presents itself at some of those other, things that present themselves to us.
Exactly. And the other thing that makes me think of as you were saying this is we don't even know if those higher people or more influential people are going to lead to that ultimate opportunity.
Right.
It's a story that we always create. That's why I'm a huge believer on this concept of the power of your story, because everything boils down to the story. It truly does, in my opinion. What's the story that you're creating internally, and what is the story that you are creating externally that's entirely based on the language that you have within you? Mm. So when you tell yourself, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or it's impossible, or what are other people going to think of me? It's the same exact things that you're going to attract outside of you. And then you begin to wonder, and the reason why I say you as a general you is because I did this for years. I did this for years. And I lost myself as part of that process because I began to question, why is this happening to me? Mm-hmm. Why am I attracting this energy? Why am I attracting these groups? Why am I thinking that I can't do this? Because it all starts inside. Mm-hmm. I recently had a realization before the gym and everything had closed at the complex that I live in due to the contact or the space that we're required to have between people.
Yeah.
As I remember, I got to the gym, it was very early in the morning, And in my mind, prior to starting the workout, I had set a goal to go through 3 sets of the particular exercises. I got done with set 2, and I had this thought in my mind saying, you had enough. You're good. Go home. Continue on with the rest of your day. But then what it made me think of was actually stop in that moment and recognize something that I've never recognized to this level before. And that is this. The reason why all the years prior, when I looked at my to-do list, and the reason why I haven't been able to accomplish all of those things is because I gave myself that permission that it's okay to only finish 5 out of 10. It's okay to push yourself to tomorrow. Well, here's the thing, that tomorrow, it's a never-ending concept, because tomorrow literally becomes tomorrow, and then it becomes the week after,
right?
And then it becomes 5 years down the road, and then we actually never do it.
Right.
And the gym moment made me realize this. And I remember telling myself that I'm going to do this 3rd set. Even if I don't do it with the same intensity, just due to the fact that I'm already exhausted, I'm still going to do it. And that's what helped me realize that when we talk about this concept of what makes certain people keep going, what makes them continue on through the adversity or whatever it is, I think it's your ability to not quit on yourself. I think it's your ability to tell yourself that, hey, I'm just going to do it. And here's the thing. There's no standard to it. There's no criteria. When I was doing that 3rd set, there was not a checklist that said, if I didn't do this, I failed.
There was not like the 3rd set police that were like, you have to do it this way.
Exactly. You got to do it at this intensity. You have to do this many number of sets. You just do it. You do it because you want to do it. And that's the thing is sometimes I think I forget that too when it comes to anything. When it comes to starting a business, I remember the numerous times I caught myself in this position where I would think that before I start a business, I need to invest $5,000 into a website. But who's to say that that's the quality of the website that you're meant to have?
Right.
You determine that.
Yeah.
So why can't you build the whole thing yourself with Wix? And who cares about how it starts off when it first looks?
Right. I mean, I think that's really a good thing to ask yourself, because I think in general, we tend to have way higher expectations for ourselves than what other people have for us, and we put ourselves at a level of perfection. Some of us do. I'm talking to myself right now, and it's hard to. It can be hard to get out of that space of saying, "Oh yeah, I set the rules and this is at my pace." And it's something that I've really had to learn for myself over the last 5 or 6 years or so, because so many people, when you start out in business for yourself, want to tell you this is the way it has to be done in order for you to be successful. And there's something to be said for general practices, but as far as whether something's absolutely 100% going to work for you, just because it worked for them that way doesn't mean that that's how it's going to work best for you.
Yeah. And the steps that you're going to have to take during that journey. And one other thing that I would like to emphasize during this part is the steps that you're going to have to take during your moments of survival of your business may be different compared to other people. So there's no standard there. You create that standard, right? You tell yourself of what's acceptable. And I think the only way to learn that, in my opinion, is through experience. So I'll tell you this, when I started to build this particular organization, there were times when I looked at my fridge and all I had was half a gallon of milk and a carton of eggs. There were times where I had to reach out to other people and ask them for assistance or help or whatever it may have been. And it's like, there's no criteria to saying, don't do this, but do that. Because there's no blueprint to business. There's no blueprint to growth.
Right.
Everyone's growth, everyone's business, everyone's vision is going to require a different set of steps. Because let's face it, you're not me and I'm not you. So you may feel perfectly comfortable picking up the phone, but I may not.
Right.
But does that make me wrong? No. It just is. That's just a quality. That's just a trait of mine.
Right.
That's just how I operate. I may feel comfortable sending an email, but you may not. And so I think oftentimes it really just boils down to just understand who you are, understand your own possibility, understand your own potential, and then just build from it. Just learn to really just accept yourself for who you are as an individual right now and wherever you are along that journey, because no one else gets to tell you that.
Right. Right.
And then what I've learned beyond that is there's really no point of living a life based on someone else's opinion of your reality.
Some of us have really been, that's like a life lesson, trying to get there to where we can create those boundaries of saying, you can value someone else's opinion without internalizing it and making it what you have to do with your life.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, opinions are free. Most opinions, right?
And
so
everybody's got them.
And everyone's got them. So why should you take that to heart? And why should you put that into a plan?
Yeah.
Without evaluating it and taking it with a grain of salt? Because everyone's going to give you a different opinion. And it's the same exact thing how you and I can look at this notebook and have two different perspectives. But it doesn't make yours right and it doesn't make mine wrong.
Right.
It's just how I see the world and what I choose to look at ultimately.
Do you think that a lot of people in general are really stuck in that idea of there being right or wrong, good and bad, and this is like black and white, really? Do you think that a lot of people are stuck in that place?
In my opinion, I would say yes. And it took me a while to understand that the world is gray.
Yeah.
It's not black and white. I don't think any circumstance is black and white, to be honest with you. Because, and the reason why I believe that is because there's a story within a story, always. The story that you may be telling me now may not be the ultimate story about what the situation you're going through. And the reason why is because you haven't developed the language around that situation. You haven't developed the confidence, you haven't developed the courage, whatever it may be. And so I think we try and understand it from a black and white, rather, life is complex. I mean, okay, let's face it. If everything was black and white, why is it that we can't answer what is life?
Yeah. It's just not that easy. It's just, and I mean, I think in a way too, we're opening ourselves when we're opening to consider that not everything's black and white, that things get so much more beautiful. And it really validates how many stories there are. You and I are both big proponents for telling your story and sharing your story and all of that, how many stories there are. And in fact, on this season of the show, my viewers were all very accustomed to my good friend Shoshana Chaim, who's come on the show numerous times. And this season, we also hosted her husband, who came on to tell, she's told their story many times, but he came on to share his perspective and what he went through and all of that. And it was the coolest thing to kind of mesh all of that together and see, okay, there wasn't just this one way, and it's not that the story changed, it's just that there were two different lives being lived. Yeah, it was really cool to experience that, and it just kind of makes things more colorful, not so black and white.
Yeah, and perception is everything. I think it's the same exact thing. How if you were to even ask my parents about who is Oleg, how would you describe him, they might tell you a completely different story, but that's because they had an opportunity to see me from a completely different lens. They had an opportunity to see me from a parent and how I was as a kid. I haven't had that opportunity to see myself. I saw myself as that person that's in the moment going through the different events. But if you look at them from the perspective of why are they doing it this way, or what are they thinking, you can't possibly know that. So whatever it is that I'm doing, everything's a matter of perspective. And that's why I think when we look at a lot of the situation and the groups and the voices that you try and elevate through your particular platform, it makes no sense to judge, because we all come from such different and diverse and rich backgrounds. And what I mean by rich, as far as not money, but more so experience, the thoughts that we go through, the people that we meet, the journeys that we take. And sometimes we fall into the trap of I'll give you an example. Homeless people. We look at people like that and say, wow, I can't believe it. Or I sure hope that never happens to me.
Mm.
Well, let's face it. A, you don't know if it's going to happen to you. And B, what if that's a lot? Like, how do you know how they got there?
Mm.
How do you know how do you know the circumstances that put them in that situation? I can name you numerous homeless people in Austin, Texas that live here that I have weekly conversations with prior to playing basketball with a lot of my friends. And they actually tell me how they're extremely satisfied with the life, how they're still able to find the same exact elements that you and I seek for in our daily lives, the joy, the connection, the belonging, understanding, the identity. They're able to experience all of those in that same exact community.
Yeah.
And they also have a community.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no one way of living it.
Yeah.
There's no one way of doing it.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about in our time together so far, you've used a lot of phrases about being an individual and about diversity. I would love for you, before we run out of time, to tell everybody about your organization now and who you serve and what that looks like.
I appreciate you asking that question. And the organization, as I mentioned, I think at the very beginning of it all, it's called Overcoming Odds. And really the reason why the name, it is what it is because of the journey that I went through. And I still go through, and I believe that we all have odds to overcome. We all have obstacles to overcome and challenges. And so really the name of the game becomes, how do you work through them? How do you continue to create those messages of optimism, resilience, and hope that you can do it? And I think the best way, what I've learned to create a safe space like that, or an opportunity for those messages to exist, is to travel through other people's journeys, to put yourself in the shoes of others and help yourself understand that, hey, I may not have been there at the same exact moment or same exact event, but I can relate. I can go through the themes that I went through when I experienced X, Y, and Z. And that's really what I wanted to create. And initially it started off as a platform for adoptees and foster youth to be able to share their experiences and really embrace their journeys. But since what it's become is really just people of all walks of life coming in and being able to relate around these concepts of hardships, around the small victories that we all have during our days, and also understanding that we're not alone throughout this journey. And I think that's the most important part that I want to tell people, is that you truly are never alone. If you think about it, and if you actually try and Google whatever it is that you're going through, you're going to find at least one other person that has gone through a similar event. Not the same exact circumstance, because I don't think that's possible. But as far as the theme and the principles that are applying to it, it's similar. When we talk about poverty, homelessness, bankruptcy, divorce, fatherless, whatever the topic may be, there's so many other people that have gone through it. And so when I made that choice and I had that realization of creating this space, that's what kind of made sense to me, is that there's no point of going through life alone.
I love that so much. We need more of that right now, of just not feeling like, because even when we put ourselves out there, we think, and I talk about this in my community all the time, where, I went on this mission to find myself and do all this personal development and spiritual development and putting myself out there more. And I thought, well, if I'm putting myself out there more, like it's going to be great. Like I'm going to have, people that I'm close to, and my circle's going to get, and that's just not the experience I have. It became very lonely because so many people could not, in the circle that I was already in, understand what I had been through or what I was struggling with, or why was I even trying all of this stuff. So I feel like we're really in a time where, when many of us are working on ourselves or going through something that we're struggling with in our lives, to have those people to relate to and understand, and at least hear us when we say what we're going through, is just so necessary right now.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'd like to point out about what you just said is, when you pursue a mission such as the one that you're doing, when you're creating a space and a community for other people, I think there's a common misconception, and that is those that chose to start that work have somehow figured out this whole journey of life. And that's just not a thing. All it means is that you have found the courage to take the first step in creating that, or that's what you were seeking, a community of other people, like-minded individuals. And what better way to find that group than to actively put yourself in the driver's seat of attracting people like that. And so part of this community building process, what I've learned is that first, there's this concept that I think those that have started are somehow perfect human beings. And that's just not the truth of it all. We're still going through challenges. We're still relying on the same exact resources that a lot of other people are. I still have mentors. I still have people that I call and cry to.
Yeah.
I still do the same exact things that every other individual does.
Yeah.
And so that's a really important thing to acknowledge, is understand that we're all, at the end of the day, we're still human beings. We're actively trying to figure out just like anyone else is. And what I've learned through this journey, another thing is that oftentimes we are the ones that get judged first, right? If something doesn't work out, or let's say you made a mistake and I go to you and say, how could you do this when you started this community, when you started this group that talks about X, Y, and Z, and yet you made a mistake that goes against what you created? Well, A, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So that's how the mistake happened. And B, you're not perfect. You're still trying to learn through it. So don't judge, but just understand that those that started whatever initiatives that they're going, they're still humans.
Right.
You know, I look at athletes all the time, and whenever I watch sports, I put them on this, I mean, literally the greatest pedestal that's available. And whenever Tom Brady throws an interception, I just lose it. I think to myself, how could this happen?
Shout out to Tom Brady, because I'm a Pats fan.
How could he make,
even though he's not on the Pats anymore?
You know, how it's such a costly mistake. Like, he just lost his team a chance for a Super Bowl, or literally lost the Super Bowl.
Yeah. But
then I got to take a step back and say he's also human. If he was a perfect human being, I don't think there would be any joy of watching anything ever.
Right.
Because it's actually the mistakes, it's the learning that I think we deeply engage in.
Yeah.
When we see other people, there's a reason, I think, when we see, and I don't have the research, nor am I in the field of psychology officially, I guess you could say, but there's a reason why we closely resonate with elements of fear, stress, challenge, struggle, adversity. And in my opinion, I would say those are much stronger than the elements of joy, pure happiness. Like, that seems to me you have to put a little bit more effort to engage with. It's not an equal playing field. Same concept with the negative emotions. And I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and the guest on the show was sharing how when you say something negative, and then when you say something positive, the negative thing has a significantly higher frequency and vibration. So you actually have to almost say 3 or 4 positive things to equal it out, to level it out completely. And that's just the interesting part about life, is that whatever it is that you say, and especially during a time like this, and let's hope that by the time this gets released, that we get through the adversity that we're in right now. But if not, what do we learn from it?
Right. Yeah.
How is this changing us? How is this making us better people ultimately?
Yeah. I think like we said all along, that there will be many things that we'll learn from this. And if we look back on this time and say, this didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to, or envisioned it, or in the way that maybe is the way I wanted it to go, then we have to say, what can we change moving forward? And I think that's going to be where you see the people are successful are the ones that choose to keep going and that choose to take what they've learned and make the shifts necessary and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so thankful for the time that you spent with me today and sharing a little bit about your story and about your organization and just having this conversation with you in general, because I just have a feeling that it's we're the type of people, we'll sit here and it'll be 5 hours later and you'll be like, what are we doing? What's happening here? But I just want to say thank you. And this is something that I've really been adamant about on this season, for those people like you who are really being vulnerable. And it's not, people don't realize how it is to come out and tell your story that maybe not always the easiest to tell, and to admit your mistakes and to make the world a better place through sharing your story. I just thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world, because we definitely need more of that right now.
I appreciate it. No, I appreciate you creating the space and an opportunity for me to be me and share my story. And I hope that anyone that's listening and is wanting to connect, learn more, or just ask questions or be there, whatever it is, that I'm open to whatever the connections may come from it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Breakthrough. Please visit our website at www.thebreakthroughshow.com. And be sure to join our After the Breakthrough community powered by Patreon. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place for another inspiring episode.